We are starting this journey on the east side of Anchorage, right near the intersection of Boniface Parkway. Go ahead and take the on-ramp, merging onto the Glen Highway, also known as Alaska Route 1, heading north. We have a long, incredibly scenic, and deeply historic drive ahead of us. We are taking a 33-mile journey out of the state's largest and busiest city, pushing deep into the agricultural and pioneer heartland of the Matanuska-Susitna Valley. Whether you are driving this route solo, soaking in the quiet of the highway, or you have the whole family in the car with the kids pressed against the back windows actively searching the tree lines for wildlife, this route offers an absolute masterclass in Alaskan history, geology, and survival. As we merge onto the Glen Highway and safely get up to speed, take a long look out your windows to the left and to the right. For the next several miles, you are driving directly through the middle of a massive, heavily secured federal reservation. This is Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, universally known up here simply as J-Bear. The presence of this massive military installation is not just a footnote in Anchorage's history, it is the exact, fundamental reason Anchorage is a modern metropolis today. Before the 1940s, Anchorage was a quiet, struggling, isolated railroad town fighting to survive. But when the Second World War erupted, and Japanese forces bombed the port of Dutch Harbor and physically occupied islands out in the Aleutian chain, the United States government realized with terrifying clarity how incredibly vulnerable the Alaskan territory was. The military essentially took over the town overnight. They poured in tens of thousands of troops, laid down massive concrete runways, and frantically built an impenetrable, heavily armed fortress to defend the entire North Pacific theater. But the extreme tension in this specific airspace did not end with the Second World War. As we drive this long, straight stretch of highway, I want you to imagine the sheer, high-stakes anxiety of the Cold War era. For decades, Elmendorf Air Force Base was the absolute, undisputed front line of defense against the Soviet Union. The airspace over the Bering Sea and the Arctic Ocean was a constant, dangerous, invisible chessboard. Fighter pilots stationed right here lived in a state of perpetual, terrifying readiness. Sirens would scream in the dead of night, and within absolute minutes, pilots would be strapped into the cockpits of heavily armed interceptor jets, screaming off the runway into the freezing, pitch-black Alaskan winter night to intercept unknown, heavily armed Soviet bombers that had crossed into American airspace. It was a high-tension, zero-margin-for-error environment that went on for years, entirely out of sight of the civilian population sleeping in the city just a few miles away. Even today, if you look up through your windshield, you might see massive C-17 Globemaster transport planes or incredibly fast F-22 Raptors practicing complex, high-G maneuvers in the restricted airspace right above our roof. We are officially leaving the immediate Anchorage Bowl now, cruising north. On your right-hand side, the Chugach Mountains are beginning to completely dominate the eastern skyline. They form a massive, jagged, imposing wall of ancient granite and glacial ice that rises thousands of feet straight up from the sea level basin. The highway we are driving on is squeezed onto a narrow, highly contested shelf of land between those towering, avalanche-prone mountains to the east and the deep, freezing, fast-moving waters of the Cook Inlet to the west. As we cross over the Eagle River bridges, you will notice the landscape opening up. We are passing through the bedroom communities of Eagle River, Chugach, and Peters Creek. Many of the people who live here commute into Anchorage every single day. They willingly trade a longer, often treacherous winter drive for the chance to live tucked away in these deep, wild mountain valleys. Keep your eyes constantly scanning the tree lines, the highway medians, and the edges of the asphalt. It is incredibly common to see massive brown bears, black bears, and towering moose standing right on the edge of the highway. This busy road completely bisects their natural, ancient habitat, and despite the high-speed traffic and the noise, the wildlife here moves wherever and whenever it pleases. Now, as we pass the town of Peters Creek and the highway begins to curve, closely hugging the coastline, look out your driver's side window to the left. You are looking at the Nick Arm, a massive, sweeping branch of the Cook Inlet. Depending on the exact time of day and the gravitational pull of the moon, you might see a vast expanse of choppy gray water, or you might see miles and miles of exposed, shimmering, dark gray mudflats stretching all the way to the opposite shore. I want to talk about those mudflats, because they are one of the most uniquely dangerous and terrifying natural hazards in the entire state of Alaska. From the safety of the car, they look perfectly flat, solid, and inviting. They look like a fantastic place to pull over, go for a walk, and look for sea glass or take a photograph. But they are a deadly, highly deceptive trap. That is not normal mud out there. It is glacial flour. It is incredibly fine, microscopic rock dust that has been pulverized over millions of years by the crushing weight of ancient glaciers. When this glacial silt is saturated with water from the receding tide, it behaves exactly like quicksand, but with a terrifying, localized twist. If you walk out onto those flats, the physical vibration of your footsteps causes the silt to instantly liquefy beneath your boots. You sink. But the exact moment you realize you are sinking and you stop moving in panic, the water is immediately squeezed out of the silt by the surrounding pressure, and the mud instantly solidifies around your legs like setting concrete. The suction is absolute, creating a flawless vacuum. You cannot pull yourself out. Now, imagine the sheer terror of that scenario, because the Cook Inlet boasts the second highest tidal range in the entire world, second only to the Bay of Fundy. The tide does not just slowly, gently creep in. It races across those flats at speeds of up to 10 miles an hour, carrying freezing, silt-choked glacial water that can rise 30 feet in a matter of hours. The rescuers have a terrifyingly narrow, unforgiving window of time. Because pulling on the victim will only tear their joints apart due to the massive suction, the rescue crews have to use specialized equipment. They carry heavy pumps and long metal lances, physically injecting high-pressure water and air deep into the mud directly around the victim's trapped legs to break the incredible vacuum of the silt. They have to do this exhausting, precise work while the freezing, dark ocean water is rapidly rising past the victim's waist and then their chest. It is a grueling race against the brutal, unrelenting physics of the ocean and the earth, a highly volatile situation where a single mechanical failure with a water pump, or a slight miscalculation of the incoming tide, means absolute tragedy. When you look out at those calm, beautiful gray flats reflecting the sky, remember that you are looking at one of the most unforgiving environments on planet Earth. Always, always stay on the pavement. We are continuing north, putting the Nick Arm behind us for a moment. We are approaching the exit for Eklutna. We are not getting off the highway today, but as we drive past this exit, I want you to understand the deep, ancient history of the land we are currently crossing. Eklutna is the oldest continuously inhabited Athabascan settlement in this entire region, dating back over 800 years. Long before the highway was paved, long before the massive military base was built, and long before the city of Anchorage even existed, the Dena'ina Athabascan people lived here, perfectly adapted to the extreme, violent cycles of the Alaskan seasons. When Russian fur traders and Orthodox missionaries arrived in the 18th and 19th centuries, the culture of Eklutna underwent a profound, incredibly complex change. If you were to drive into the historic village today, you would see a fascinating, beautiful blending of two entirely different worldviews. In the historic cemetery, the graves are covered by spirit houses. These are small, intricately constructed, brightly painted wooden houses built directly over the burial sites. In the traditional Athabascan belief system, it takes 40 days for the spirit of the deceased to travel from this world to the next. The family builds these little houses, complete with tiny windows and doors, to provide a comfortable, familiar shelter for the spirit during its long, arduous journey. The houses are painted in specific family colors and are intentionally left to slowly weather, decay, and return to the earth naturally, sitting right next to traditional, 3-bar Russian Orthodox crosses. It is a beautiful, quiet, and profoundly moving monument to a resilient people who survived devastating historical epidemics and the overwhelming wave of modern expansion, proudly maintaining their identity and their ancestral footprint right here on the edge of the busy highway. As we continue north on the Glen Highway, the towering mountains to our right begin to pull back slightly, and the landscape ahead opens up into a massive, sweeping, wide-open valley. We are approaching the Nick River and the Palmer Hay Flats. Get ready, because we are about to cross a long, continuous series of bridges spanning the highly braided, shifting channels of the Nick and Matanuska rivers. As we drive out onto the bridges, look at the vast, low-lying wetlands stretching out as far as the eye can see on both sides of the highway. This is the Palmer Hay Flats State Game Refuge. But this massive, watery wetland was not always here. It is the direct, visible result of the most terrifying geological event in Alaskan history. On Good Friday, 1964, the magnitude 9.2 earthquake struck this region. The tectonic plates deep beneath the Earth's crust shifted with such unimaginable, violent force that the entire massive landmass you are driving over right now physically dropped. It sank nearly 2 full feet in a matter of 5 terrifying minutes. Before the earthquake, This area was a dense coastal spruce forest and a series of dry, highly productive hay fields used by early pioneering farmers. When the land dropped, the massive, 30-foot high tides of the Cook Inlet poured in unhindered, instantly drowning the forest and the farms in freezing salt water. Today, if you look closely out across the marsh, you can still see the ghostly, silver, sun-bleached dead trunks of those drowned trees sticking up out of the mud, a haunting graveyard of the old forest. But nature is incredibly adaptable. The drowned forest transformed into a massive, thriving estuarine wetland. Today, it is one of the most vital, nutrient-rich habitats in the state, swarming with tens of thousands of migratory waterfowl, towering moose, and muskrats. Hold onto your steering wheel tightly and stay centered in your lane as we cross these bridges. This specific geographic bottleneck is notorious throughout the state for something called the Nick wind. During the deep winter, massive, heavy high-pressure systems build up in the deep, freezing interior of Alaska. That freezing, incredibly dense air seeks the path of absolute least resistance to the relatively warmer, lower-pressure air sitting over the ocean. It funnels directly down the Matanuska River Valley, acting exactly like a massive, natural wind tunnel. The winds here can routinely hit hurricane force, screaming across these exposed bridges at 80 to 100 miles an hour for days at a time. They are so incredibly violent that they can easily flip massive, fully loaded tractor trailers completely onto their sides, shutting down the highway. When the Nick wind is blowing in the dead of winter, carrying blinding clouds of abrasive glacial silt and driving snow, the wind chill can instantly freeze exposed human skin. Driving this exact stretch of road during a severe winter storm is a white-knuckle, terrifying experience that demands absolute focus, white-knuckle grip, and profound respect for the sheer, terrifying power of the weather. We have safely crossed the bridges and are now officially entering the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, known to everyone up here simply as the Matsu. The Glen Highway begins to curve to the right, heading east toward the town of Palmer. But watch the large green highway signs closely. We are coming up on a major, high-speed interchange. The Glen Highway continues east toward the towering Matanuska Glacier, but we are going to merge left, transitioning onto Alaska Route 3 North, which is also known as the Parks Highway. As you take this sweeping, elevated transition ramp onto the Parks Highway, I want you to appreciate the legendary road you are now on. The Parks Highway is the great, vital northern artery of Alaska. It is the road that connects the coastal population centers directly to the deep, untamed, freezing interior. If you were to stay on this road, it would take you straight up into the towering Alaska Range, delivering you right to the front gates of Denali National Park, home to the tallest, most imposing mountain in North America, before continuing all the way north to Fairbanks. This highway is a legendary corridor for road trippers in rented RVs, long-haul truckers pushing through the snow, and adventurers heading into the vast, wild heart of the state. But we are not driving all the way to Denali today. We are only going to be on the Parks Highway for a very short stretch, about a mile and a half. Make sure you stay in the right lane. We are looking for the Trunk Road exit, which will be coming up quickly. As we cruise this short stretch of the parks, look around at the landscape of the Matsu Valley. It is noticeably different from the tight, mountain-walled, densely populated bowl of Anchorage we left behind. It is vast, rolling, and heavily forested, but it is broken up by massive farms, red barns, and wide-open agricultural fields carved out of the wilderness. This entire sweeping valley is the agricultural heart of Alaska, and the story of how that happened is one of the most incredible, desperate, and audacious experiments in American history. Go ahead and take the Trunk Road exit now. As you come up the ramp and approach the modern roundabouts, we are entering the historic territory of the Matanuska colony. The year was 1935. The United States was suffering through the absolute darkest, most devastating depths of the Great Depression. In the Midwestern states of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, the economy had completely collapsed, the soil was failing from drought, and thousands of hard-working farming families were facing absolute starvation and complete financial ruin. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and his New Deal administration came up with a radical, unprecedented, and highly controversial plan. They decided to take 203 of the most desperate, impoverished farming families from the Midwest, put them on trains across the country, load them onto steamships, and relocate them thousands of miles north to this exact, untamed valley in the territory of Alaska. The government promised them 40 to 80 acres of uncleared, wild land, a basic house, and the chance to start their lives over from scratch. When those families arrived right here in Palmer in May of 1935, it was absolute, chaotic misery. The government bureaucracy was completely unprepared for the reality of the Alaskan wilderness. There were no houses built. The families, including pregnant women and small, terrified children, were forced to live in a muddy, sprawling city of canvas tents while it rained constantly for weeks. The mosquitoes were apocalyptic, rising from the damp earth in suffocating clouds. They had to frantically race against the clock. They had to physically hack down massive, ancient spruce trees by hand, using draft horses and highly dangerous dynamite to clear the massive, deep-rooted stumps, desperately trying to build log cabins before the lethal, freezing Alaskan winter arrived to claim them. It was a scenario of extreme, unimaginable hardship. The winters were brutally cold, the isolation was crushing, and many families simply could not handle the terror of the wilderness. Dozens of families gave up, broke down, and fled back to the lower 48. But the ones who stayed, the stubborn, incredibly resilient pioneers who fought the land and won, fundamentally changed the trajectory of this state forever. Navigate carefully through the roundabouts on Trunk Road, heading south. We are getting very close to our final destination now. Those resilient, hard-headed colonists discovered something absolutely incredible about this valley. The soil, composed of rich, wind-blown glacial loess, was incredibly fertile. But the real magic, the thing that defied all agricultural logic, was the sky. Because we are situated so incredibly far north, this valley receives nearly 20 hours of direct, relentless, blazing sunlight a day during the absolute peak of the summer. That endless midnight sun causes the crops to grow at a frantic, almost terrifying rate. The plants literally do not sleep. They photosynthesize around the clock in a desperate rush to mature before the frost returns. This valley became world famous for producing absolute mutant, giant vegetables. If you were to go to the Alaska State Fair, which is held just a few miles from here in Palmer every single August, you would see the mind-blowing results of this bizarre agricultural anomaly. We are talking about massive heads of green cabbage that weigh 138 pounds, cantaloupes the size of beach balls, and carrots that look like heavy wooden baseball bats. The colonists took a desperate, muddy gamble in a freezing wilderness and successfully turned it into the thriving breadbasket of the last frontier. We are driving down Trunk Road now, surrounded by patches of dense, white-barked birch forest and wide-open, beautifully cultivated fields. This specific area is deeply, permanently tied to that agricultural legacy. We are approaching the field day site, which is operated in conjunction with the University of Alaska Fairbanks Matanuska Experiment Farm and Extension Center. Keep your eyes peeled for the turnoff just ahead. This site is a massive, living, breathing outdoor laboratory. For decades, dedicated agricultural scientists, botanists, and researchers have been working right here on these very fields, intensely studying the unique, extreme conditions of subarctic farming. They crossbreed and develop entirely new, cold-hardy strains of grain. They study the shifting, unpredictable behavior of the permafrost, and they teach modern Alaskans how to maximize their short, frantic, 100-day growing season. It is a direct, unbroken continuation of the desperate, determined, never-give-up spirit of those original 1935 colonists, constantly pushing the scientific boundaries of what can survive, grow, and thrive in this beautiful but unforgiving environment. If you take a map of Alaska and lay it directly over a map of the lower 48 states, it stretches from the coastline of California all the way to the beaches of Florida. It is a landmass of absolutely incomprehensible scale. But if you look at a traditional road map of that same massive state, your brain might struggle to process what you are seeing. In a state that is 1/5 the size of the entire United States, there is really only a handful of major highways. The vast, overwhelming majority of Alaska is entirely untouched by asphalt. You cannot drive to the state capital of Juneau. You cannot drive to the western hub of Nome. You cannot drive to the island communities of Kodiak or the Aleutian Chain. When you get behind the wheel of a vehicle up here, you are not just taking a road trip. You are traveling along a very fragile, incredibly hard-fought ribbon of civilization that has been scratched into the surface of a primal, unforgiving wilderness. Today, we are going to explore the Alaskan road system. We are going to trace the history, the engineering miracles, and the terrifying realities of driving across the last frontier. To understand how this sparse, isolated network of roads came to be, you have to go back to the very beginning, to a road that was born out of absolute global panic. Before 1942, Alaska was essentially an island. There was absolutely no road connecting the territory of Alaska to the rest of the North American continent. The only way to get here was by steamship across the treacherous Gulf of Alaska or by daring bushplane flights. But when the Second World War erupted, that isolation became a massive, terrifying strategic liability. Japanese forces had bombed the port of Dutch Harbor and physically occupied the islands of Attu and Kiska in the Aleutian chain. The United States military realized that Alaska was the vulnerable backdoor to the continent, and they desperately needed a secure, overland supply line to move troops, weapons, and heavy equipment north. The result was the Alaska Highway, universally known today as the Alcan. In March of 1942, the United States Army Corps of Engineers was given an impossible task. They were ordered to build a 1,500-mile highway through the uncharted, brutal wilderness of northern Canada and into Alaska, and they had to do it immediately. Over 10,000 soldiers, including thousands of black soldiers in segregated regiments, were deployed into the frozen forests. The conditions they faced were apocalyptic. In the winter, the temperature plummeted to 60 degrees below zero, freezing the oil in the engines of their bulldozers and snapping solid steel axles like twigs. In the summer, the frozen ground thawed into a bottomless, swallowing ocean of mud and muskeg. Men were literally eaten alive by clouds of black flies and mosquitoes. Bulldozers would sink completely out of sight in the bogs. Yet, working from both ends and meeting in the middle, they punched that 1,500-mile pioneer road through the absolute wilderness in just 8 incredibly brutal months. It is widely considered one of the greatest engineering feats of the 20th century. Today, the Alaska Highway is fully paved, and it remains the great, legendary umbilical cord connecting the last frontier to the rest of the world. Thousands of road trippers drive it every summer, tracing the exact path of those desperate soldiers. Once you actually cross the border into Alaska on the Alcan, you connect to the oldest highway in the state, the Richardson Highway. The Richardson does not owe its existence to the military, it owes its existence to the frantic, chaotic fever of the gold rush. In the late 1890s, thousands of desperate prospectors arrived by steamship in the coastal town of Valdez, hoping to strike it rich in the interior goldfields of the Klondike and Fairbanks. They faced a seemingly impossible barrier, the towering, heavily glaciated Chugach Mountains. The original route was nothing more than a treacherous, narrow pack trail carved by men and horses through the deep snow of Thompson Pass. It was a trail of absolute misery, where avalanches routinely buried entire pack trains. In the early 1900s, a visionary military man named Wiles P. Richardson worked to upgrade this brutal foot trail into a wagon road. Decades later, it was finally paved, becoming Alaska Route 4. If you drive the Richardson Highway today, you are driving through a corridor of extremes. When you cross over Thompson Pass, you are driving through the snowiest place in the entire state of Alaska. The pass receives an average of 500 inches of snow a year. During massive winter storms, the state has to deploy military-grade artillery cannons, firing high-explosive shells directly into the mountainsides above the highway to trigger controlled avalanches, clearing the slopes before the snow can naturally break loose and bury the road and any cars on it. As you drive the Richardson, you will also notice a constant, massive silver companion following you along the route. The Trans-Alaska Pipeline parallels the Richardson Highway for hundreds of miles. You will see it climbing impossibly steep mountain grades and crossing massive suspension bridges over roaring rivers. The road and the pipeline are permanently linked, a constant visual reminder of the resource extraction that funds this state. From the Richardson, you can turn west onto the Glen Highway, another vital artery that connects the interior down to the coastal hub of Anchorage. The Glen Highway offers one of the most breathtaking, mind-altering roadside views on the planet. As you drive through the Matanuska River Valley, the mountains suddenly part, and you find yourself driving directly past the toe of the Matanuska Glacier. It is a massive, 27-mile-long river of ancient, glowing blue ice that spills right down the mountain and almost touches the asphalt. But the Glen Highway is also notoriously dangerous. In the winter, the steep, winding mountain passes become sheets of polished ice. The massive, high-pressure wind systems that funnel down the valley, known as the Nick winds, can reach hurricane force. They blow massive, blinding clouds of ground snow across the highway, reducing visibility to zero and occasionally flipping massive, fully loaded tractor trailers completely onto their sides. Driving the Glen in January is not a scenic tour, it is a tense, high-stakes battle against the elements where a single mistake on an icy curve can send a vehicle tumbling down a mountain ravine. When you finally reach Anchorage on the Glen, you arrive at the hub of the Alaskan road system. From here, the state opens up in two entirely different directions. If you head south, you merge onto the Seward Highway. This 120-mile stretch of road, connecting Anchorage to the port town of Seward, is widely considered one of the most beautiful drives in the world. It has been designated an All-American Road and a National Scenic Byway, and for good reason. The Seward Highway begins by squeezing itself onto a razor-thin shelf of rock blasted out of the Chugach Mountains, running parallel to the dark, fast-moving waters of the Matanuska-Susitna Valley. As you drive, you are sandwiched between vertical, avalanche-prone cliffs of granite on your left and the ocean on your right. You have to keep one eye on the road and one eye on the water, because it is incredibly common to see pods of pure white beluga whales surfacing in the gray waves, chasing runs of salmon. If you look up at the cliffs, you will almost always see doll sheep, perfectly balanced on the sheer rock faces, completely unbothered by the high-speed traffic below. But the Matanuska Arm holds a massive, terrifying power. It boasts the second highest tidal range on Earth. The tide does not just slowly creep in, it arrives as a massive, roaring wall of water known as a tidal bore, moving at up to 15 miles an hour. The mudflats that sit alongside the highway are made of glacial silt, which acts exactly like quicksand. If a person walks out onto the mud and gets stuck, the incoming tide will drown them in minutes. The Seward Highway is beautiful, but it requires absolute respect. In the winter, this stretch of road is constantly threatened by massive avalanches. The state maintains an aggressive avalanche mitigation program, but even with artillery fire and helicopter bombing, the highway is frequently buried under tons of heavy, concrete-like snow, completely cutting off the Kenai Peninsula from the rest of the state for days at a time. Now, if you were to leave Anchorage and head north instead of south, you would take the Parks Highway. Completed in 1971, the Parks Highway is the great, vital interior artery of Alaska. It is a 320-mile ribbon of asphalt that connects Anchorage directly to Fairbanks, completely bypassing the old, longer route of the Richardson and the Glen. The Parks Highway was built for two reasons: to shorten the drive time between the two major cities, and to open up the crown jewel of the Alaskan wilderness, Denali National Park. As you drive the Parks Highway, you are tracing the edge of the mighty Alaska Range. On a clear day, the views from the driver's seat are staggering. Rising out of the sprawling, green expanse of the Susitna River Valley is Denali. At 20,310 feet, it is the tallest mountain in North America. It is so massive that it literally creates its own weather system. You can be driving on dry, sun-baked asphalt, while the mountain in the distance is engulfed in a roaring, localized blizzard. Driving the Parks Highway means crossing some of the most impressive engineering spans in the state, like the Hurricane Gulch Bridge. You drive your car out onto a delicate-looking web of steel that spans a massive, terrifyingly deep gorge, with a roaring river looking like a tiny silver thread hundreds of feet below your tires. It is a drive that makes you feel incredibly small, surrounded by millions of acres of unbroken, untamed boreal forest. But if we are going to talk about the Alaskan road system, we have to talk about the absolute most extreme, isolated, and dangerous road of them all. If you take the Parks Highway all the way to Fairbanks, and then continue north on the Elliott Highway, you will eventually reach a dirt turnoff that leads to Alaska Route 11. This is the Dalton Highway. But no one up here calls it that. They call it the Haul Road. The Haul Road is a 414-mile stretch of dirt, gravel, and crushed rock that pushes directly through the absolute wilderness, crosses the Arctic Circle, climbs over the Brooks Range, and ends at the industrial oil camps of Prudhoe Bay on the frozen edge of the Arctic Ocean. It was built in 1974 in just 5 frantic months, specifically to support the construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. It was never meant for tourists, and for decades, civilian traffic was strictly banned. Today, it is open to the public, but driving it is not a vacation, it is a massive logistical operation,